I want to introduce to you Hal Harvey, who is the winner in the environment category of the Heinz Awards. Hal is an extraordinary talent. He's been operating on the national and international stage for years and is credited with helping to speed what we all hope will happen quickly, which is the transition from fossil fuel energy to alternatives. When our jury met to discuss him, when our board convened to discuss him, what they kept coming back to was the innovative way in which he looks at problems, the solutions that he brings to the table, and his unbelievable persistence in carrying it all over the world. And lately, he's been working extensively in China and has been making inroads even there. So we're delighted to be able to welcome you, Hal, and Hal Harvey, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you. So I woke up this morning with one wish, which is that I didn't want to follow trombone short in playing that. Thanks, guy. I've got 5 minutes to talk about one of the most complex and crucial problems on the planet, which is climate change. And most climate change strategies and conversations and books begin with a parade of horrible things that are going to happen to you that covers 90% of it, and then 10% quick, we can maybe do something about this. I'm going to flip that ratio. You get exactly one bad news slide, which is this. And it's just to stop thinking about one thing. Because of partly climate change, but mostly political reasons, there's an enormous and horrible refugee crisis in Syria. 5 million of these refugees have made it to Europe, and they're tearing apart in a very sad and horrible way the largest political union on the planet, right? It's fundamentally threatened because of 5 million refugees. So what happens when we have 200 million climate change refugees? And if you think this is an exaggerated number, I'm telling you that there are about 1.5 billion people who will be affected by sea level rise this century. That already more than a third of Bangladesh, which has 150 million residents, has been underwater at times. So this is upon us. That's just one bad thing that we get if we don't deal with this problem pretty quickly. So I told you only one bad slide. That's it. Okay, how do we win? I talk about 4 zeros, or I'm going to talk about 4 zeros today. Fundamentally, we need to zero out carbon. And the way you do that is you make every carbon-consuming device in the world, every building, every factory, much more efficient, and you power them with solar and wind and other renewable sources. If I stood here 6 years ago and told you this was feasible and economical, you could have fairly laughed me out of the room, and I've said that, and I've been laughed out of some rooms. But today it's different, and why it's different is because of a revolution in technologies. And it's hard to overstate the importance of this. This is a solar field, everyone has seen these. The price of solar energy has dropped more than 80% in the last 6 years. The latest bids on new solar plants were 2.5 cents a kilowatt hour. That's about 1/5 of what you pay retail for power today, right? The cheapest power ever offered was a recent solar bid. This is no longer boutique technology. And the scale at which this is growing is staggering. And the same goes for wind, by the way. 60% drop in the last 5 years. Many energy-consuming technologies, like lighting, have dropped at a similar pace. Batteries are getting cheaper, about which the next slide. The point is, and there have been deep studies now, the transition to a low-carbon energy future costs the same as continuing on a high-carbon path within any reasonable measure of accuracy. But it won't happen without specific, focused policies. So the first zero is we have to make the electricity system decarbonized. California and New York will be 65 to 70% decarbonized within just 14 years, based on existing policy and existing technology. So it's possible. This is the next big wave, is if you have zero carbon electricity and you have an electric car, you have zero carbon transportation. It's that simple. And the price of batteries has dropped actually faster than even other technologies now. So this is becoming a feasible world. 25 years ago, I built my own electric car. I powered it by solar power. Wasn't that hard. It wasn't a very good car. Now they're a lot better. And they're a hell of a lot cheaper, and they're getting better. So next time you buy a car, go to zero. The third zero, buildings. We should have zero net energy buildings. That means over the lifetime of a building, it should produce as much energy as it consumes. This is the Bullitt Foundation headquarters in Seattle. It's 100% self-sufficient on energy. on water. It even handles its own waste. It's designed for a 300-year life. Now, this is an extreme example, perhaps, but there are now a number of jurisdictions in the Nordic countries, and soon California, that will have zero net energy be the minimum requirement for new residential and then commercial construction. So this one's on the way too. Not least, I should say, by some incredible professors and scientists here at Carnegie Mellon University. The third zero is industry, and this one's harder because industry is complicated and heterogeneous. But industry is getting reinvented as well with things like 3D printing and green chemistry. So if each of these sectors is where the energy goes, it's where the CO2 comes from, it's what causes climate change, and in each one there is now a path to success. So how do we get on that path? How do you transform the utility structure from high carbon to low carbon future? Right now we spend about $1 trillion on electricity in this country per year. That's your bill going to your utility. The people who decide where that money lands are the Public Utilities Commissioners. There's about 5 in every state, and they decide whether your electricity lands on green or brown choices. So 50 states, 5 commissioners each, that's 250 people that decide whether we go to zero or fail. You actually don't need 50 states. I've said here only 30 states matter. That's not politically correct, but if you do the math, there's big states and there's little states. Let's do the big states. And you don't need to win on a 5-0 vote. You can win on a 3-2 vote. So we're now down to 90 Public Utilities Commissioners who decide the fate of this. And they live in a constrained and interesting environment, very much like a judicial environment, where you can, with intelligent work, intervene in their proceedings and make the case that they should switch from brown to green. And they listen, and it works. I'm here to tell you it works. The same is true for each other sector and for every country. There's a small number of decision makers who have spectacular disproportionate influence on our energy future. In order to reach them, you have to have a focused precision approach. You need to know the particulars. You cannot walk into that forum blank-minded or just with vast aspirations. You have to know exactly what drives their decisions. You have to have a policy option that works, and you have to stick to it. That's the recipe. It's not that complicated. It's not easy. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes focus, it takes expertise, but it works. And the transition is vast and fast underway. There's about a third of the states in America right now that are on the transition. We can finish the job. So that's I'm going to skip the rest of this because I'm out of time. Here's my last 2 slides. We get this future, and believe me, when natural systems blow up and go nonlinear, it's a very terrible thing. And there is no recovery from this. Or we get a different nonlinear system, which is this one. I'm telling you, the opportunity to clean up the grid, to get rid of the sins of fossil fuels is with us now. So, thank you. Yeah.
So I'm going to try and ask this question without getting political. But the environment in which you're operating is one in which there are plenty of people, including people in positions of influence, who deny that climate change is happening. And there are powerful interests that are reputed to be lobbying to kill precisely the sort of innovation that you're putting forward. How are you going to win against that?
So you've come right to the essence of the question. If it costs the same to land on a green energy future as a brown one, why don't we just do it? And the problem is, of course, incumbent industries will fail, right? Almost every single coal company in America except one is now in bankruptcy because this transition is underway and it's irreversible. I think the way to overcome it is not through rhetorical arguments, but through specific practical examples of people's lives improving. So if you have energy systems that are cleaner and you have less air pollution, if you have cars that are quieter and you have less noise in the street, if you don't have to pay a tax on, in effect, a national security tax on imported oil from the Middle East, that's a pretty patriotic thing to do. So you don't have to have a frontal battle on ideology. You simply say, let's just get on with it. And most people are extremely amenable to that. My favorite example is the Green Party and the Tea Party got together in North Carolina to fight for the opportunity to put solar on your roof and spin the meter backwards. They call it green tea.
That's excellent. You talked about the climate refugees, and we were all, I think, compelled by that example. And the 1.5 billion figure, which is where you think we're going with that, is even more compelling. There is a mentality that we encounter in this country, though, that most of that is happening elsewhere. So when we think about it from a U.S. perspective, why should the problem of climate refugees be something that we care about?
We heard just a couple words about Katrina when Troy was up here. This was not a huge storm, not hitting a huge city. And now, how many years later and how many tens of billions of dollars spent have we recovered? Not completely, right? Important progress, but really serious damage. What happens when we get 4 storms that are full-scale storms and they're hitting Boston, and New York, and Richmond, Miami, right? There's not enough money in our society to fix that. There's a professor at Princeton, Rob Socolow, who says future generations will spend most of their money moving cities inland. So think about that. We put our cities on waterways for a reason, including this one. It's because of transportation. And so if you take apart that structure, if you look at the implications of that structural advantage and you subtract that advantage and make it a liability, it's a profound worry.
So Pittsburgh right now is proudly touting its resurgence as a center of innovation, including in areas related to this. Are there any that you see Pittsburgh potentially excelling in? I think
in advanced manufacturing and zero energy buildings, zero net energy buildings. So Carnegie Mellon has a fantastic computer sciences program and a building energy sciences program and an energy technology program, including the one run by former President Jared Cohen here. And those meld together. You know the Nest thermostat, those $250 cute round thermostats? When you put them on your house, they reduce your energy consumption by 15%. Because they know if you're in there or not, they know what the weather patterns are going to be, and they know how fast your house reacts to temperature changes into the furnace and the air conditioner kicking on and off. Now imagine if you gang up 1 million of those and you begin dispatching houses in response to variable supply. You've converted every house into a thermal battery at price of 0. So what you're doing is you're substituting information and control paradigms for physical systems. That's the software economic model applied to large physical items. And then last, with advanced manufacturing, this is an industrial town, right? Steel, aluminum. Those are subtractive industries. You build something and then you grind it down and drill it and mash it into something that you actually want, like a car frame. We're moving into additive industries where you put drop by drop materials into things. So you're replacing mass with knowledge. You're replacing stuff with information. And that's the step to a zero carbon industrial future.
Great. I love the optimism and enthusiasm. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant.